Welcome in, everyone, to the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, and, of course, get us live on YouTube and Facebook as well. The Twitter feed is Talkin_Tide. Give us a follow there. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll keep you up to date with Alabama athletics throughout the year. A quick thanks to Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, our fine sponsor here on Talkin Tide. And Travis, we rejoin our listeners and viewers after a little bit of a hiatus, couple of 3 weeks since we've launched a podcast. A lot's going on in that time, a lot going on right now. The last time we podcasted, Travis, I debuted that new fancy podcasting mic that was going to enhance the quality of the audio for me anyway. And now here I am back to the old headset, only because I'm on the road in Oklahoma City to cover the WCWS for the Tuscaloosa News, and that big mic. Fear not, that big mic is going to be used 90+% of the time. But when I'm on the road, the headset is the play. To bring it along. Kind of hard to get some of that bigger podcasting equipment on Southwest, Travis, when you're trying to jam carry-on bags into the overhead bins and whatnot. So, I'm here in OKC, Alabama softball team here for the Women's College World Series. Alabama baseball team, of course, still alive and kicking, Travis, as a host school for the NCAA regional round. We've got the SEC meetings going on in Destin. We've got basketball players facing a deadline of today, whether to go ahead and stay in the draft or come back. It looks like all of that dust has pretty much settled for Alabama. But where to begin, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty to cover since we last met, no doubt about it. Obviously, the Women's College World Series right up there at the top of the list. I'm officially jealous. That's been a bucket list item of mine for some time now. So wish this was both of us out there in OKC. And you said it, just a continuation of news as it relates to really the roster of Nate Oates' next team. Big to apparently get Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears back in that backcourt, I think is kind of a byproduct of Charles Bediako leaving. If you're not going to potentially be as good as you were defensively last year, you need all the scoring production you can get coming back, especially with Brandon Miller moving on. But, Clowney, Bediako, move on to the next level. Those are two really good front court defenders, guys who could extend even outside the paint and get it done defensively. So to get scorers and facilitators of scoring back in Sears and Quinterly, some good news for Alabama fans. As you said, we're right up against that deadline of May 31st for NBA draft entrance. And then the baseball, absolutely just an improbable run for this team. Felt like maybe they were seated a little low in that 16 overall spot, Chase, but hosting nonetheless.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and stay right there and talk baseball before we start moving around to some of these other discussion topics. Like you said, 16 was Alabama's seed. Yeah, I thought they'd come in mid-teens, maybe not 16. I guess they kind of squeezed it. Makes you wonder if they'd only won one SEC tournament game, what would have happened in regard to hosting? Because that was kind of the game where everybody felt like, all right, that's the clincher, right? They should be able to host a regional, and that's exactly what they're doing. They ended up winning 2 SEC tournament games. Of course, they beat Kentucky, they beat Auburn. They got eliminated 9-2 by Vanderbilt. Got beat by Florida too. And kind of a heartbreaker, a game they had pretty good command of late, Travis.
Hell of a game. Yeah.
And then Florida just jumped all over Alabama's relief pitching there at the end, launched a big home run, and kind of stole that one from the Crimson Tide in the last moments.
They did a walk-off job by the Gators. And you talk about Florida, you may be talking about the best team in college baseball going into regional play. I'm sure Wake Forest will have something to say about that. By the way, Alabama, should it advance through the Tuscaloosa regional and Wake Forest do the same, Alabama would see the number one overall seed in the supers in Wake. But still a lot to sort through for this team. You think about this field of the Tuscaloosa regional, and you see Boston College and Troy and those 2-3 spots. You think of BC and you think snowbird baseball, right? I mean, just not accustomed to seeing a team from the Northeast in that type of position, but apparently a really solid club in the Eagles. I'm old enough to remember the Maine Black Bears, Chase, being a staple, not only in college baseball, but in Omaha back in the days. You go back to the 80s, like I'm capable of doing, the early 80s.
Right.
And they were. But BC headed down south, and should be a fun weekend of baseball. I know Alabama fans are excited. And again, never probably thought they would see June baseball at the Joe.
No doubt about it. Alabama hot down the stretch, 8-2 to finish the regular season. And of course, those 10 games coincide with Jason Jackson taking over as interim coach. They go 2-2 in SEC play, so 10-4 combined since the program was rocked by that gambling investigation, and now they get to host. We'll see what happens if they're able to move on to a super regional. But one of 8, Travis, SEC schools hosting a region. The SEC's got half the regionals. So a big presence for the league. Also, a couple more teams on top of that. I believe Texas A&M made the NCAA regionals but are not hosting. So I guess 10 overall schools headed on, and just a heck of a year for SEC baseball on the whole.
Yeah, we seem to say that every year, right? And again, it's hard to imagine the national champion from Omaha not coming from the league. It's something else we've grown accustomed to seeing. We've said it before. You want to understand SEC baseball. Understand that the last 2 national champions didn't make it not just to a regional, they didn't make it to the SEC tournament.
Right.
And Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Nothing encapsulates what this hell league is more than the 2 teams from Mississippi not advancing to Hoover after winning national championships each of the last 2 years.
Absolutely. And it's just going to get crazier when Texas and OU are involved, and not just baseball, but softball.
Softball with OU, yeah, and Texas, but OU especially, yeah.
So, yeah, good segue there to the WCWS. Alabama wins that super regional this past weekend against Northwestern. Had to go to a tiebreaker game on Sunday to get it done. That was one of only 2 softball super regionals that went to that Sunday tiebreaker. 6 out of 8 were 2 and done, and only 2 of them ended up going to Sunday, including Alabama. They get it done. Tight games, Travis. I was at 2 of them. On Friday night, I was at the Met watching Vanderbilt dispatch the baseball team, and then I came back to Tuscaloosa and caught the softball team on Saturday and Sunday. And, boy, you want to talk about getting the most out of your runs scored. Alabama only scored 6 runs the whole super regional over 3 games, and managed to get out of there 2-1 over a Northwestern team that was had some good pitching and really had Alabama on the ropes a couple times.
Yeah, and it came on the heels of a championship Sunday performance the weekend before, where Alabama scored 2 runs in 2 games and still managed to advance to the Super. So thinnest of margins, no doubt about it. But as you know, even more so than is the case in baseball, timely hitting, situational hitting, huge in softball. And so whereas you might have a player go through a pretty good stretch where it's just not happening, all it takes is one at bat to kind of change the narrative. I thought Jenna Johnson on Sunday had one of those kind of at bats and giving Alabama that additional run that proved extremely important. But again, you have to credit the pitching. Montana Fouts giving what she was able to give despite not being 100%. You talk about storybook finishes to a career, to be able to do what she did in that final game, get a strikeout in her final out as a pitcher at Alabama at Rhodes Stadium. Hollywood kind of stuff. And it seems like it's been that sort of career for Montana from start to finish. So in a lot of ways, it was appropriate. I'm sure Northwestern would disagree with that. But when you look ahead to the upcoming weekend and perhaps into next week, the concerns are still there, Chase, for this Alabama offense. We talked about it before the show. Relative to pretty much every other team I've seen Murph take out there, a few too many outs maybe in this lineup. But again, all it takes is one at bat, situational opportunities. But you really put a lot of pressure on your pitching staff when you're not able to score more than Alabama has.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Ashley Pronge has been the big bat in that lineup, but there hadn't been a ton of help for her at times. I know Pat Murphy decided to put her in the leadoff spot those last couple of super regional games, and we asked him about it. He said, look, she is the power hitter, but despite the conventional wisdom that you want that power hitter hitting in the 3 or the 4 hole, he wanted that extra at-bat. He said the best way to get her the extra at-bat is stick her at the top of the lineup so that lineup maybe turns over. And look, in a tight game in the 7th inning, if your best hitter doesn't get one last at bat that you need her to get because she's too far down in the lineup, that's one way. That's one way you can certainly regret it. But Murph has been sticking her at the top, trying to get her, I guess, one extra swing a game, and so far it's working.
Yeah, if you're in all these one-run games, the last thing you want is the final out to be made with your best hitter in the on-deck circle, right?
Yeah.
And so, absolutely. I mean, even in baseball, you're seeing it these days. Look at Judge for the Yankees and where he hits in the lineup a lot of times.
Yep.
He's 6'7". This isn't a guy hitting 4 or 5. As has traditionally been the case in previous years. So it's really an approach that makes a lot of sense. And I think for this Alabama team, this Alabama softball team, it makes the most sense.
Jayla Torrance, of course, in support of Montana Fouts through that knee injury, throwing great as a pitcher. The daughter of former Alabama linebacker Jeff Torrance. She's been phenomenal, had a 27-inning scoreless streak in the postseason that started against LIU in the regional, and pretty much split time with Fouts throughout both of those tournaments. We saw Fouts start, I guess one, but for the most part, it's been Torrance starting and Fouts coming in behind as the reliever. And when you see, we saw a couple games where Murph maybe had a run lead or a 2-run lead, and maybe in the middle innings, the tying run gets on. He wasted no time. Go get Montana. She's good enough. Maybe not 100% with that hyperextended knee. And she wasn't keen, I don't think, on talking about it this morning. I think she's a little talked out on the knee, Travis. But her velocity was a little bit down in the super regional. I think it's fair to say she's probably not 100%. Murphy said the treatment and rehab is still ongoing, but I watched her throw in the bullpen in the stadium this morning, and I thought she looked pretty darn sharp. And like you said, with the offensive struggles Alabama's had, more than anything else, they need Montana Fouts to be healthy and on top of her game.
They do, and there's familiarity certainly with this opening opponent, right? So not going to be a lot of secrets, which is interesting because when Alabama went to Knoxville earlier in the season, it was actually Alex Salter who got the lone win for Alabama in the circle, one of those 3 primary pitchers for Alabama. So trying to exercise some demons this time around, I think, whether it is Montana Fouts, maybe it's Jayla Torrance who starts once again. What I liked about Torrance and what I've liked about her down the stretch, it just seems like she is entirely comfortable with her stuff. Her velocity isn't an issue. She can get it up there in the high 60s. But she just has to trust herself and be confident and trust the people behind her, too, to make some plays. And I think Alabama, as the season has gone on, has improved defensively, which has helped. Had some new pieces, not just in that batting lineup, but defensively as well. And it's a team that pitching it and fielding it for the most part right now is in a pretty good place. And you hope that anyway. Montana, with a few more days between herself and that injury, is in even better form coming up in the next couple of days.
Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Sports Network coming at you. Travis, want to thank our sponsor really quickly, Peterbrook Chocolatier. Why don't you tell our viewers and listeners about them?
Yeah, Peterbrook Chocolatier closing in on its Sweet 16th birthday coming up. For Peterbrook Chocolatier in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, it is the very end of May. Of course, that means summer camps and not too late to enroll your special tyke in those Peterbrook Chocolatier summer camps. 205-752-0211. That is the number to call. They'll get you set up. It's a lot of fun. I promise you, you won't regret it. Also, Father's Day coming up, Goodbread. I know you would like some of that white chocolate popcorn or something, right? From Peterbrook Chocolatier.
I can go for that. I like the sea salt caramels a whole lot. I like those peanut butter melt-aways. You can't beat them. The gelato. I love it over there. And, I've full disclosure, my wife does some business with Peterbrook, with the bank. My wife's a banker.
Yes.
She's got she handles some corporate purchases, I guess. Well, there are some reward points that go along with that corporate partnership, I guess. And those reward points, they don't go to the bank. They stay in the Goodbread house.
It's like those frequent flyer miles.
That's right. Well, I've been known to spend those rewards. Here and
good
there,
for you.
So.
Yeah.
Get in there and get it done, no doubt. It's a great spot, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa. All right, Travis, moving on. The SEC meetings going on in, you say Destin long enough, it just rolls off the tongue. But it's Miramar Beach, I guess, technically. The ADs, the coaches down there, discussing the hot topic obviously is the football schedule format. Kirby Smart called it the most overrated thing out there. I don't think it's overrated. Look, you go to 8-1 for your format with one permanent opponent per school. You're going to find out real quick, Kirby. It's not overrated at all because you're going to have a lot of fans hopping mad about some rivalries disappearing. And, of course, Travis, the chatter is now that the league is leaning toward some kind of a pilot, right, for, I guess, an 8-game schedule that they're going to, I don't know, test drive. I don't know. We'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, and Kirby can say that because other than Florida, nobody gives a damn about who Georgia plays. And Florida's not much right now. I mean, obviously, Georgia-Auburn has been around forever. But really, Chase, is anybody going to lose sleep if the league says, well, we had to do away with Georgia-Auburn? No. Not if you replace it with Georgia-Oklahoma or Georgia-Texas or Georgia-Texas A&M. Georgia still hadn't been to College Station.
How do you get, you know what, though? And look, I understand if they probably are, I guess you're just going to end up trying this for a year. Maybe that 9-game schedule with the 3-6 format is still on the horizon. But how do you bring Texas in with Texas A&M and not play them? Because as long as they're going to play an 8-game schedule with only one rivalry, it ain't going to be Texas A&M. It's going to be Texas OU. That's going to be Texas's game.
And I believe the Cotton Bowl people just renewed that deal.
Right.
With OU Texas. So that tells you it's not going away. Just like we saw with Jacksonville, with Georgia, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That got renewed for 2024, 2025. It's not going. Those games are not going away, those neutral site games. So the prominent ones, who knows with Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Arlington, nobody really thinks much about that one. But no, it's very interesting. I think in some ways, I always go back to the money. I know people get tired of me doing that, but that's what we're doing, I think, is the SEC saying, well, we may stick with 8 games, ESPN.
Right.
Because our deal is based on 8. If you'd like us to go to 9, we we can talk about maybe some additional revenues. No, they wouldn't. This is college athletics.
Right,
Chase.
right.
They would never, ever do that. This would never be about getting extra bucks for that ninth game. Would it, Chase? Would it be?
If you like it.
Could you be there? I had to go Max Cady on the podcast.
Counselor.
Could you be?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. If you're ESPN, if you're any of these TV networks, you're salivating at the prospect of getting an extra SEC, a big SEC game,
yes,
on the slate for the same deal you've always had. So yeah, perhaps that is a factor here.
At a price.
That's right. So keep an eye on that. You'd like to think this thing won't drag on. Hopefully, when they leave these meetings, we'll have something. Yeah, Alabama. Obviously Auburn. If it goes 8-1, then see this pilot thing is presumably only going to last a year, right, or two. So even if they do that, they should be able to still maintain, I would think, some rivalries here and there in that scenario. It's just if they went permanent with one permanent opponent, then that would shake things up. No Alabama, Tennessee every year. A lot of people wouldn't be happy about that. LSU. Yeah. I think they're going to go to that 9-game schedule at some point. I really do.
It's a matter of when.
Time.
Yeah. And this goes back to, again, something we've talked about, I've talked about, is the non-conference portion of this that was going to play into the difficulty of the schedule if you went to 9 games.
Right.
Not just in terms of schedule imbalance from home and road games, but look at Alabama. Look at all these home and homes they've signed up for in the last couple of years. Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Ohio State, West Virginia coming up, finishing up one with Texas this year. And then between all of that, Texas and OU come into the league. Mm-hmm. So when Nick Saban originally talked about 9 or maybe even 10 conference games, I think that was before he knew that Texas and OU were coming too. So now we're hearing Nick talk about all Power 5 schedule. And I think that makes sense, and that's attractive to him because, apparently he got the tip on what he was getting from a permanent opponent perspective with potentially LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn. But also you can control your schedule more that way. If it's 8, but hey, at the same time, we're going to go all Power 5s, including our non-con 4 games. You can control that a little better than if you get 9 and they're kind of throwing at you what they want to throw at you.
I loved Saban's use of the word unwind when he was talking about those non-conference future schedules. He said, we're going to have to unwind all that if we go to
exactly
games. So,
because, if you go to 9 and you've got that 5-4 home and away, what if that's the same year that you're going to Ohio State and you've already got 5 SEC road games, and you can probably switch some things around, switch years on some of those deals, but there's more to it than just saying, let's play 9.
Right. No doubt about it. So scheduling certainly at the forefront, field storming a topic for these athletic directors as well. Greg Byrne had a little bit to say about that today, if I'm not mistaken. Who knows? I definitely think they're going to add something to the fine structure to try to get their arms around that as a league. We'll see what happens. Something to watch for there as well. Before we get out of here, though, Travis, let's circle back to the basketball that we touched on at the top. Mark Sears, Javon Quinterly headed back to Alabama. Bediako moving on. The Bediako decision hurts. I've always been a Bediako guy, but to me, that hurts Nate Oates more than either Sears or Quinterly leaving. And what it says for that roster he's got right now is it's step up time for Nick Pringle. And I think we saw enough of Nick Pringle last year that I don't have any doubt that he can be a legitimate starter in the SEC and a productive one and a quality one. But boy, Betty, even with what you would expect from Pringle in terms of improvement, Betty Iko leaves a big void on the defensive end, especially.
Yeah, you got to bring in another big or two just to practice, though. I mean, Pringle right now is pretty much it. So, as you might expect, reports surfacing in the last few days about Alabama's involvement with some transfer portal options that are out there. So that's going to continue to be the case, I would think. And Pringle's development has to take another step or two. Gifted, as we know, athletic, plays with an edge you'll love, but defensively, as far as front court defense is concerned, he's got a ways to go, mostly because if he doesn't improve, he's going to be in foul trouble a lot. And you can't have that if you're going to be thin in the front court. So some things he's got to improve on. And Alabama with Sears and Quinterly back, it's huge, I think, again, from the perspective of you might need to score even more than you did this last year on a consistent basis, which could be hard with Brandon Miller no longer around. But, it's kind of where they're at. They've got a couple of 3 spots to fill now from a scholarship perspective. So plenty of work on the talent and the roster additions front for Nate Oates coming up.
Yeah, a year ago, Nate Oates the roster was so loaded, and he knew how loaded it was. He didn't even fill his last scholarship spot. Remember, he said, I'm not going to go get a guy out of the portal if I can only give him 3 or 4 minutes a game. That's not fair to the kid. I think he's going to fill all the spots this year.
Well, if he fills with 3 post guys, 1 or 2, even again, if you're talking about 1-year practice guys.
Yeah.
Because, you like to sometimes even have those walk-ons and even managers that you might be able to utilize in some ways. But they don't look like they have that right now with this roster. So got some work to do.
It's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Be sure to join us next time right here on Talkin Tide.